All righty. Here we go. All right. The date, October 10th, 1926. The time, well, it wasn't Monday Night Football, I can tell you that much. The teams, the New York Giants at the Chicago Bears. The place, Cubs Park. It wasn't quite Wrigley Field yet. I believe this is October 1926. The following month, it would be renamed Wrigley Field, and the Bears would play at Wrigley Field till 1970. I believe in 1971 they moved to Soldier Field. So the Bears played at Cub Park, 1921 to 26. It was all the Cub Park and Wrigley Field, the same place, but it was Cub Park or Cubs Park from 21 to 26, and then I believe it was I got an article here I'm going to read. I think remember correctly, it was November 1926. They renamed it to Wrigley Field. Wrigley chewing gum dude. So go figure. But this would be the let's see. I know it's the third game of the season for the New York Football Giants. They came in at a sparkling record of 2-0. This would be, all right, looks like, looks like it would be the third. Hold on, I want to get this down here. Trying to figure exactly how many games this is. Well, for the Bears. Trying to see if they played an exhibition game. This is either this would be their fourth game. Bears' fourth game. Now, I mean, it was back then, many teams played different amount of games. The Giants played 13 games. They were 8-4-1 in 1926. The Bears played 16 games. They were 12-1-3. So, a lot of teams play different amount of games. Now I'm going to go over to 1926 real fast. I mean, the Frankfurt Yellow Jackets played 17 games. As I mentioned, the Giants played 13 games. The Louisville Colonels played 4 games. The Hammond Pros played 4 games. The Columbus Tigers played 7 games. The Racine Tornadoes played 5 games. The Dayton Triangles played 6 games. The Akron Indians, who were the Akron Pros / Indians, I believe it were. They were the first ever champions in 1920. So teams played all different amount of different games. Some started, like maybe they had weeks, like week 1, week 2. But I mean, sometimes maybe a bunch of teams might have started week 1, but other teams didn't start till like week 2. I know, like with the Giants didn't usually play their home games until like many weeks into the season. The Giants didn't play their first home game till October 17th. They played the Frankfurt Yellow Jackets at home. The Giants played a exhibition game on the road in Trenton. They played the Hartford Blues on the road. They played the Providence Steamroller on the road. They played the Chicago Bears here on the road. Then they were supposed to play the Canton Bulldogs on the road, but that game looked like it got canceled. Then they played the Frankfurt Yellow Jackets on the road. So the Giants didn't play until halfway into October. Now, basically, pretty much for the Giants, what wound up happening was, for them was because they're sharing the same stadium, right, with the New York baseball Giants. And I guess the Giants, the football Giants, would go in after the season was over, or if there was any hope or whatever of the Giants making going to the World Series. They wanted, I guess, the whole season to be over, and then the Giants would go in. I'm not exactly sure what happened with the Bears, because they wound up playing. Let's see here, they played here because they're sharing the same place with the Chicago Cubs, right? Actually, this would be the Bears' first home game. So they were sharing the place with the Cubs, so they didn't move. Their first home game wasn't obviously until this week here, which was week 4, October 10th. That was the Bears' first home game. The first 3 games were on the road. They played. They beat the Milwaukee Badgers 10-7. They tied the Green Bay Packers 6-6. Maybe you've heard of them. And then they beat the Detroit Panthers 10-7. Right, so the Bears came into this game at 2-0-1. The Giants came in at 2-0-0. Right, both teams. Neither team had a loss. So, but unfortunately for the Giants, all good things would come to an end. So, but the Chicago Bears, they first came in as the Decatur Staleys, interestingly enough, in 1920. Let's see, the 1920 season with the Decatur Staleys, they were 1920 was the Decatur Staleys' second season in existence. 1919, there was no NFL, or actually it was the APFA. 1920, 1921, it was the APFA. 1922, it became the NFL. But the Decatur Staleys when it came into existence in 1919, and then they joined the league, or when they formed the league, they in 1920 they were part of the inaugural season. Let's see. So the Decatur Staleys football team was founded in 1919. In 1919, A.E. Staley was gearing up for what would be the most prolific decade. The decade from 1920 to 1930 would begin with the creation of the Staley Athletic Program and the beginning of the Decatur Staleys Football Club. Why would an industrialist, which he got his hands into pretty much everything. Why would an industrialist like Staley would embark in the field of athletics? Let's see. There was an author who wrote a book, said that of the 75-year history of the Staley Manufacturing Company, suggested several possible reasons. First, he offers that A.E. Staley, having come from humble beginnings and having had very little formal schooling, missed out on the opportunity to participate either actively or as an observer in any kind of athletic program, although his competitive nature indicates that he would have enjoyed sports because he was a very competitive man. Another possible reason for embarking on an athletic program in his inherent lessons to be learned regarding sportsmanship. Staley surely must have thought that employees participating in sports, either actively or as spectators, would grow to value the lessons learned of being a team player, good sportsmanship, character building, as well as building a sense of team factory loyalty. Staley also might have regarded this as good, healthy entertainment for his employees, who otherwise spent their days working in a town focused basically on industry. But maybe more than any other reason is the fact that A.E. Staley was an entrepreneur with big dreams. He wanted to see the Staley name and product line succeed. What better way to promote the Staley name than by an organized traveling sports team? Well, they had a home. They had their own home team. It was, I think it was it Staley Field? I believe it was called. But it could only hold so many people. Staley Field, yeah. I mean, it was a small field, and it could not hold if they wanted to grow, I mean, the team, and for it to survive, they couldn't stay where they were at. That's why one of the reasons why they wound up going to Chicago. But let's see, but maybe more than any other reason is the fact that A.E. Staley was an entrepreneur with big dreams. He wanted to see the Staley name and product line succeed. What better way to promote the Staley name than an organized traveling sports team? It is probably safe to say that all of these factors came into play, motivating Staley, A.E. Staley, to begin a company-supported athletic program. So basically, this was just a company-supported athletic program, right? I mean, that would be like, I don't know, Amazon, right? They get together, they get some guys from Amazon, right? They get a team built to get together, right? And they form a football team, and it takes off after that, right? So the football club goes pro. The unfolding of the Staley Football Club and its development from a purely industrial team to a semi-professional team and then a fully professional team begins, oddly enough, with a game that was played in 1919 against an area team called the Arcola Independents. The Staley team at the time was made up of regular Staley manufacturing employees, right, who had shown interest in the sports program. In that first game against Arcola, the Staleys would wind up winning 41-0. The competitive entrepreneur in Staley asserted itself, and Staley decided to grow his own semi-professional team. First, he contacted Dutch Sterneman, the man responsible for putting together the Arcola team, but Dutch was close to finishing the mechanical engineering degree at the University of Illinois and was not ready to make a commitment to an ongoing sports program. Staley then turned his sights to George Halas, known for his prowess in both baseball and football. He was a very good athlete. Halas had played end at the University of Illinois football team and had then gone on to play with the Great Lakes Navy team during World War I. This team played and won the January 1st, 1919 Rose Bowl game against the Mare Island Marines. Okay, there you go. That's the powerhouse, the Mare Island Marines. Halas then went on to try his luck at baseball. He tried out and was contracted by the New York Yankees, but was injured in an exhibition game against the Brooklyn Dodgers. This injury would keep him out of Major League Baseball. He ended up taking a job with Chicago, Burlington, and Quincy Railroad. It was at this time that A.E. Staley sent his general superintendent, George Chamberlain, to meet with and make an offer to George Halas. Halas was hired by Staley to coach and play football as well as play baseball under the management of former Major League Baseball pitcher Joe Ironman McGinty. Halas was paid a weekly wage of $50. In the summer of 1920, George Halas went out on what some had called the first professional football recruiting journey in history. When Halas returned, he reported to Staley that he now had a team that would draw standing room only crowds. The agreement with the recruited players provided that they would enjoy the stability of a regular salary based on their work week at the Staley Manufacturing Company. So these guys were here. It was for them, it was maybe playing football and all of that, but a lot of it was so much of it was money. Where can I get some money? So he went out, he recruited these guys, I guess he knew who were good football players, but it's like, come here, you work here, you're going to get a salary, all right? You got money, okay? And you can play football, and we're going to pay you to play football. Right. So, let's see. Their work week would provide for 2 hours daily training as part of the football club. So basically what it was, I seen this video, is that they worked at the manufacturing company during the day. And then in the afternoon, they had 2 hours where they would practice football. Additionally, they would receive a portion of the gate at the end of the season. Thus, the Decatur Staleys were born. The Halas contribution to both Staley and the national football did not stop here. On September 17, 1920, Halas and Staley engineered Morgan O'Brien met at the Hupp Mobiles and Jordan's showroom in Canton, Ohio, with a group of men that outlined in the course of 2 hours what would become the American Professional Football Association for 2 years. 1922 would become the NFL. It was at this meeting that Jim Thorpe was elected president. The formation of this association was an effort to adopt a single set of rules for the game, which up to this time varied greatly from region to region. So basically they got a bunch of teams came together and, they formed the APFA, right? And the Decatur Staleys would become one of them. After the I'll read this right to you here. This is the main reason why the Decatur Staleys, they had to go someplace. If they were to survive, they had to go someplace else. The success of the team and growing popularity of the sport required Staley to rethink the football program. Now, A.E. Staley, right? He was an innovator. He could think, right? He's like, what does this team need to do to survive, right? The problem was that Staley saw was one of simple business sense. He was a very good businessman. A limited growth in the Decatur versus the potential for growth in a larger market. The Staley Field could only accommodate about 1,500 seated fans with another 1,000 standing. So at the absolute most, they can hold maybe 2,500 people. There was one of the games I saw that I think they had 3,000 people there, but that's about all, right? Unlike like Wrigley Field, they can hold, 30,000, if not more. The price of the tickets was only $1, and Staley employees paid half price. This was combined with the fact that in the 1921 season, only 2 of the 11 games were played at home. Despite A.E. Staley's immense pride in the team he had created, the popularity of the sport was growing, and the potential growth of the team depended on it being moved to a larger city with a larger venue. Staley found himself in the position of having to make a business decision. Was he in the corn processing business, or was he in the blossoming business of professional sports? Well, I guess he should have stayed with the professional sports, but it is what it is. So the Decatur Staleys go to Chicago. Staley met with George Halas and explained the situation and made Halas a proposition he could not refuse. Staley said that big-time football needed big city crowds, so it was agreed that in October 1921, the Decatur Staleys would relocate to Chicago and play at Wrigley Field. It wasn't Wrigley Field. It was called Cubs Park back then. It wasn't going to be Wrigley Field until, as I believe, I'm going to read this article in a second, I believe it was November 1926. So they would retain the Staley name for one season. So in 1921, they went from Decatur Staleys to the Chicago Staleys. 1922, they went to the Chicago Bears. The 19 players on the roster would remain on the Staley payroll for the course of that first season, and Staley agreed to pay the team a $5,000 bonus to help with the move to Chicago. George Halas noted that Staley had no legal or moral obligation to promote the continuation of the football club, but Staley was a big man who understood big dreams, and he saw the big potential in the team he had created. Staley will later go to games up in Chicago when he could, and he referred to the now Chicago team as the Transplants. At the end of the 1921-2022 football season, it was time for the Staleys to change their name. Given that they were sharing, well, it wasn't Wrigley Field at the time, but it says here, given that they were sharing Wrigley Field with the Chicago Cubs, they decided to call themselves the Bears, arguing tongue-in-cheek that football players were bigger and larger than baseball players. So if the baseball team was called the Cubs, right? Bears, little Bears called Cubs, well, we're going to be called the Bears because we're bigger, right? So, and it said in Wrigley Field, right? Actually was called, Wrigley Field first opened up in 1914 as Wegman Park for Charles Wegman's Chicago Whales of the Federal League, which folded after the 1915 baseball season. The Cubs played their first home game at the park on April 20th, 1916. The Cubs played, let's see here. Chewing gum magnate William Wrigley Jr. of the Wrigley Company acquired the Cubs in 1921. It was named Cubs Park from 1920 to 1926 before being renamed Wrigley Field in 1927. The stadium currently seated 41,600 people. So I saw someplace it said that history. Oh, wait, maybe. Well, I know I saw someplace that it was called in November of 26. They renamed Cubs Park. They renamed it Wrigley Field, but it is what it is. But the first few years that the Bears played at Wrigley Field, it was actually called Cubs Park. So the Staleys started off, as a small team, and obviously they moved so they can have, more growth. Because their first season in 1920, the Decatur Staleys, they played a couple home games. Their attendance was 1,500 people. They played another game later on in 1920 at Staley Field, and they had 3,000 people there against the Hammond Pros. Now, the thing is that, if they had, like, say, 3,000 people there, everybody paid a dollar. Well, some of the people who worked at the Staley Manufacturing Company only paid 50 cents. So they might have pulled in, and that's if they had 3,000. The first couple of games only had 1,500 people. They might have made like $1,000 or so, right? And quite often, I know back in like when the Giants started, like in 1925, a lot of teams, sometimes the visiting teams, they were guaranteed so much money. So you had to come up with so much money. Well, one of the problems is that, a lot of the home teams, if they had like 3,000 or 4,000 or maybe 5,000 people, they might have made maybe $3,000 at the gate. Maybe, and if you got to dish out $2,500 to the visiting team, that leaves you with like $500. I mean, that's not enough to pay your players. So a lot of these teams, they lost money and they wound up going under as a result of it. And this was, that's and as what the Bears saw, A. Staley, which was so important, right, was the fact that, he saw that they needed growth, they needed, the bigger stadium. So that's why the Decatur Staleys, I think they're like about an hour south, if I remember, of where Chicago is at. So they moved about an hour north. And so they said they played there from 1921 to 1970. 1971, the Bears started playing at Soldier Field in Chicago. So this was for the Giants anyway. This would be their third game of the season. They would also play the Bears later on in the season. I was supposed to play the Bears later on in the season, which I'm going to do a video on this one as well too, on December 5th. But there was some snow. And so they decided to cancel. There was a few inches of snow, and for whatever reason, they decided to cancel the game. The field wasn't in very good playing condition, so they decided to cancel the game. But this was a very interesting season for the Chicago Bears because at the end, let's see, I got it right here. Now it's 1926. There we go. Interesting because the Bears wound up with one loss. The Giants wound up 8-4-1. The Giants started off 2-0, but then they would I think they lost their next three games. If I'm not mistaken here. Yeah, they lost their next three games. So they lost this game to the Bears, and they lost the next two games to the Frankfurt Yellow Jackets. So the Giants were 2-0. They lost three, so they wound up 2-3. But then they played pretty well during the end of the season because they wound up 8-4-1. So they went from 2-3 to 8-4-1. So they wound up pretty good. But this season was very interesting for the Bears especially at the end of the season because it's back in the 20s and up to 1932, the team that won the championship were declared the champions, had the best overall winning percentage. So it wasn't so much, let's get to the playoffs and let's win the Super Bowl. It was none of that. Who won, who had the best overall winning percentage? Well, at the end of the season, the Frankfurt Yellow Jackets, who would be the champions in 1926, had a record of 14-1-2. The Bears were 12-1-3. So the Frankfurt Yellow Jackets, ties didn't count. I mean, nowadays a tie counts as like half a win and half a loss. Ties didn't count back then. So basically, the Frankfurt Yellow Jackets were 14-1. The Bears were 12-1. So the Frankfurt Yellow Jackets, with a winning percentage of .933, they were declared the champions. The Bears, with a winning percentage of .923, came in second place. But the Bears were undefeated almost all the way through the season. They played the Frankfurt Yellow Jackets in Philadelphia on December 4th. The Bears went in, they were 11-0-2. All they had to do was they tied the Frankfurt, because the Frankfurt Yellow Jackets had a loss. Let's see here. When did Frankfurt wind up losing? Who did Frankfurt lose to? Frankfurt lost to the Providence Steamrollers 7-6 about a month and a half prior. So Frankfurt came into that game with one loss. The Bears were undefeated. The Bears go into that game on December 4th against the Frankfurt Yellow Jackets. The Bears were 11-0-2. So if the Bears even just tied, because the Frankfurt Yellow Jackets had a loss, the Bears even just tied, quite possibly they would have won the championship, because the Bears played 2 additional games. They beat the Pottsville Maroons, and they tied the Green Bay Packers the final week of the season. So the Bears, going into that one game against the Frankfurt Yellow, if they had tied, they possibly would have won. Well, they lost 7-6. There was no scoring in the first 3 quarters. The final quarter of the game, the Bears, Bill Sen had a 62-yard run. They missed the extra point, put them up 6-0. Well, I love this here. I'm going to do a video probably somewhere along the line on this game here, but 2 Bits Holman got a 27-yard pass from Hust Stockton. Tex Hammer kicked the extra point, and the Frankfurt Yellow Jackets would wind up winning 7-6. So, and they would wind up capturing the 1926 NFL championship based on best winning percentage. But on a missed extra point, the Bears were up 6-0. They tried for the extra point. I'm not sure if it blocked, if he just missed it, what happened, but they missed the extra point. Had they kicked the extra point, they missed an extra point. It cost them a championship. So that was it was a very, very well for the Bears and the Yellow Jackets. It was an exciting season. But I got a couple of articles here I'm going to read over. As I said, this would be the first of 2 games the Giants were supposed to play against the Bears. They were supposed to play the Bears at the Polo Grounds on December 5th, but the game got canceled because of some snow. So, but I got my book here. I got the good book here. Anytime I see anything, pertaining to in this book here, something. There's like a couple paragraphs on this game here in this book, so I'm just going to read this out here. Says here the Giants were 2 for 2, right? Because the Giants started the season off 2 for 2. They beat the Hartford Blues 21-0, and then he beat the Providence Steamroller 7-6. The same thing happened in that game. The Giants blocked the Providence Steamroller. The Giants were up 7-0. The Providence Steamroller scored late in the game, and they went for the extra point. They tried to drop kick the extra point and got blocked. I believe it was Tilly Voss. Oh, yeah, word to your mother. Tilly Voss went in there, blocked the extra point, and the Giants would prevail 7-6. So back then it was tough kicking extra points. Let me tell you what. So it says here, the Giants were 2 for 2. So they played 2 games. They won them both. So the Giants boarded a train for Chicago, and game number 3 was late Friday afternoon. So it wasn't 1 o'clock in the afternoon. It was at Chicago. It was at Cubs Park, which was Wrigley Field. So there were no lights there. I can't remember exactly when they started putting lights in there, but there's lights in there now. But for the longest time, any game played. I'm a Met fan, so anytime the Mets played the Cubs in Chicago, back when I was growing up in the 70s, it had to be during the day. So if they played them like Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, whatever it was, they were all day games. They finally got lights put in there. I can't remember what season it was, but it says late afternoon. So I'm late Friday afternoon. I'm sorry, they took the they took the train late Friday afternoon. They didn't play the game late Friday afternoon. But I'm saying, obviously Cubs Friday, there's no lights and on. So this game had to be played at maybe 1, 2 o'clock in the afternoon. But Doc Alexander, his play suffering from his coaching, and his coaching suffering from his medicine. Now, the Giants was Doc Alexander. He was their coach for the 1926 season. He was only their coach for one season. And the reason why was because after the 26 season was over, they wanted somebody who could devote basically almost all of his time to coaching. And the Giants would get Earl Pottinger for the 1927 and 1928 season. But so Doc Alexander would coach the Giants for one season, as I said, as he was a doctor during the day. But after his doctor duties were up, then he could devote some time in the afternoon to the team. But sometimes the players would start practicing and he would be late. He was the coach, and the team might be out there, 3 o'clock or so in the afternoon, and Doc Alexander's showing up at 3:30 or 4 o'clock to coach the team. So that didn't work out real well. So after the season was over with, he was relieved of his duties so then he can, I guess, maybe concentrate more on being a doctor. But the Giants wanted somebody who could devote pretty much, I guess, all their time or most of their time to being the Giants coach. So Doc Alexander is he tried to play, but he's trying to coach and play. So his playing when he was out there on the field suffered because he's trying to be the coach. But then, as it says here, his coaching was suffering because he was also a doctor, right? He couldn't leave, so the team left late Friday afternoon. Took a train to Chicago for the game, but the coach, because he was a doctor, Doc Alexander, couldn't leave until Saturday. So the team was in Chicago, right? They left Friday, they're in Chicago, and the coach isn't even with them. So the coach, he couldn't leave until Saturday and wound up spending most of his train ride giving football lessons to Tim Mara, the owner of the Giants. And quote, right? Doc Alexander says, "I talked about the team, our strengths, our weaknesses," said Alexander. Then all of a sudden, Tim started talking about the Giants. He was feeling low and he was unhappy, and maybe he even was a little bit scared by Pyle. Now, this is Pyle, C.C. Pyle, cash and carry Pyle. He formed his own league. It was called, basically, it was like the AFL. I think it was the APFL or something, but it was pretty much like the American Football League. He formed his own league, and he had some teams in New York. And one of the problems is that it wasn't the way it is nowadays, where like no matter what, almost every game is sold out and all. Well, back then, I mean, they had like kind of territorial rights, and Tim Mara, this guy Pyle, cash and carry Pyle, wanted to play, get his own team in Yankee Stadium, but that's kind of close to the Polo Grounds where the Giants played at. So Tim Mara said, "Why don't you go play at Ebbetsville where the Dodgers play?" He wanted to play in Yankee Stadium, and Tim Mara's like, "Well, that's too close. If we happen to play in the same day, we're going to be cutting each other's throats. You're going to get half the team, half the crowd. I'm only going to get half a crowd. We're losing out, right?" But this guy, cash and carry Pyle, so he said, I'm playing in Yankee Stadium whether you say so or not. So he couldn't get the agreement from the NFL to play in Yankee Stadium, so he formed his own league. So for this 1926 season, basically was like the AFL versus the NFL, and the AFL didn't fare very well. I think they had 9 teams, and they all went under by the end of the season because they just weren't very good. The football was not very good, and they couldn't get a lot of people to show up for the games to make some money. So, but Tim Mara for this 1926 season, he was worried how much money he was going to lose because he's trying to compete against another league, and they're taking some of his fans away from him. So he was really, really worried about this other league. But it all, as we saw, it all worked out fine for the Giants because they made it through there. But so Tim Mara started talking about the Giants. He was feeling low and he was unhappy, and maybe he was even a little bit scared by Pyle because of the new league that's cash and carry Pyle formed. He was worried. Tim Mara. He told me he was sorry now he'd ever gotten involved in the war with Pyle, and he realized he'd lose a small fortune fighting the new league without knowing if he'd ever win. Then he started talking about his two sons. I guess the only reason I'm staying in this now is Jack and Wellington, Jack Mara and Wellington Mara, said Mara. You've seen them at the games. If the Giants ever amount to anything, I think they did. He said the team's all there. So, if they ever amount to anything, Jack Mara and Wellington Mara, the football team's all theirs. He's just going to give it to him. So, what a guy. What a father, huh? Because Tim Mara says, I've still got the bookmaking and they'll have the Giants. So he made his money through bookmaking, which was legal back then. He said, Jack, his two sons, Jack and Wellington, they can have the Giants, and I got my bookmaking. And here we go. After a scoreless first half against the Grangeless Bears, because Red Grange was with the Bears in 1925. Red Grange actually was in the new league that cash and carry Pyle formed. So in 1926, Red Grange was part of the New York Yankees, who played in the Yankee Stadium, oddly enough. Let's see. So the first half, there was scoreless. The Giants' line finally began to crack in the second half. With Stevenson no longer a Giant, Stevenson was the Giants' starting center. Actually, Doc Alexander was the Giants' starting center in 1925. He did a very, very good job. But I guess now being the coach, he spent a lot of his time on the sideline. So maybe he wasn't in the game all the time. But this guy Stevenson was the Giants' starting center. And back then, there was a lot of guys in the backfield, and you just it wasn't a shotgun, Joe Montana's just not, or Tom Brady's not dropping back and you're looking up, you just snapping it straight back. No, you got to snap. Sometimes there's four guys in the backfield and you got to snap it to one of the, so if you got to snap it to, say Saquon's over here, right? And I'm snapping the ball, I got to snap it to him over there, right? Or whoever. Matt Breed is over here. I got to snap the ball to Matt Breed, or if I'm snapping it to Daniel, So I got to know where it's going. I got to know where these guys are at, right? So I got to snap, So it wasn't very easy. It was tough, very tough. So the Giants didn't have their normal center in there. This guy Stevenson only played in the first two games. I'm not sure what happened to him, if he got injured or what, but he only played two games for the Giants. He was their starting center in the first game against the Hartford Blues. He played a little bit in the second game against the Providence Steamroller, and then he never played ever for the rest of the season. He didn't play for the Giants. So I'm not exactly sure what happened. If he quit, if he got fired, he got hurt, I don't know. But he was their starting center, and he was not in there. He wasn't. Let me see here. Who was the Giants starting center? Murtaugh was the Giants center. So it says here, with Stevenson no longer a Giant, who was the Giants starting center, and Alexander on the sidelines, Doc Alexander was on the sidelines, because Doc Alexander was the Giants starting center the year 1925. So now Doc Alexander's on the sideline being the coach. Stevenson, the Giants starting center in at least the first game anyway. He's not on the team anymore. So the Giants had to move somebody to become the center, and it was not an easy position. And this is where they screwed up at. Murtaugh moved over from guard, shifted the ball between deep backs McBride and Haggerty, and the Bears, it says here, shifted the ball basically made a bad snap. The ball was fumbled. The Bears pounced on it, and they got the ball, and then they went on a scoring drive, which we're going to go over. And that's how they scored their one touchdown. They wound up winning the game. So it says Murtaugh moved over from guard, shifted the ball between deep backs McBride and Haggerty, and the Bears recovered on their own 47-yard line. 7 plays later, Bears halfback Patty Driscoll plunged over from the 1-foot line, drop kicked the extra point, and the Giants had lost their first game of the season 7-0. So I got that. Then there's one I got an article right here. It says bad pass, or another, I guess, seemed like a bad snap. Bad pass costly to the New York Pros. The Giants fall 7-0 at Chicago when Bears recover the ball and go on to score. Driscoll gets the touchdown. Then victors ward off a desperate final quarter rally in which losers complete 5 passes. Ooh. No, I mean, that's 5 passes in a quarter. I mean, that would be 20 passes completed in a game. And, I mean, you complete 20 passes in a game back then. That's like completing about 500 passes in a game nowadays. I mean, they completing 5 passes in a quarter. That's a heck of a lot back then. Says Chicago, October 10th, when Murtaugh, the New York Giants center, made a wild pass soon after the second half of the New York Giants Chicago Bears National League engagement had started this afternoon. The North Side 11, or the Chicago Bears, went on to win 7-0. New York needed only a yard to make first down when Murtaugh aired. So basically, whatever it was, second down, third down, whatever it was, they only needed a yard. So had he completed, had he made a good snap, I don't know if it was supposed to be the Haggerty, if it was supposed to be the McBride, whoever it was supposed to be. If he made a good, they caught the ball and they could have gotten possibly a first down. Possibly the Giants could have continued on the drive. Maybe they would have won. But it says on the second play after recovering the fumble, Patty Driscoll went through tackle for 11 yards and a first down on the New York's 41-yard line. He then loosed a pass to Sen, the Bear halfback, who took the 25-yard pass to the New York's 11-yard line before he was stopped. Romney went outside right tackle, and it was first down less than 2 feet from the goal. But the Giants' defense stiffened. Twice, New York stopped Bear plunges, but Driscoll carried the ball over and drop-kicked the extra point. In the final quarter, so this was, it looks, I guess, they scored in the third quarter. Scored 7 points in the third quarter. So in the final quarter, New York outplayed the Bears, making 5 first downs and completing a like number of passes, but their efforts were futile. Meaning, I guess they got 5 first downs in the fourth quarter, which back then was a lot, and they completed 5 passes. So that they were moving, but they just couldn't score. It says here we have the starting lineups. Mullen was the left end for the Bears. Healy was the left tackle. Fleckenstein was the left guard. Trafton was the center. McMillan was the right guard. Murray was the right tackle. George Papa Bear Hallis was the right end. Romney was the quarterback. Patty Driscoll was the left halfback. He's the guy who scored the touchdown. Walquist was the right halfback, and Haney was the fullback for the Bears. For the Giants, Joe Doc Alexander started out apparently at left end. Steve Owens, who the Giants just got this season, was the Giants' left tackle. Carney was the left guard. Murtaugh was the center. He's the one that made the bad snap. Right guard was Williams. John Alexander was the right tackle. Bomar was the right end. Hinky Haynes was the quarterback. Haggerty was the left halfback. Grigg was the right halfback, and McBride was the fullback. Says the referee was Durfee. The umpire looks like Ritter, and the linesman was Harris. So, but that is a That's a from the New York article. I have a I gotta find it here. You know what? I think is this it? There we go. I thought I might have clicked out of it, but sometimes I do stupid stuff like that. All right, let's see here. Here we have Driscoll goes over goal line, kicks for point. It says lines prove barrier to long gains. All right, here we go. Now this is a article from I think it's the Chicago Tribune is an article. So the game was played in Chicago. So this article is a little more in depth and detailed than the one I just read, which the article was from the New York Times. It says when Murtaugh, the New York center, committed a wild pass soon after the second half of the Giants-Bears pro-grid engagement started yesterday at Cubs Park, wasn't Wrigley Field, at Cubs Park, the North Side team suddenly realized it takes points to win a football game and proceeded to demonstrate they knew how to score. In the resulting flurry, the Bears counted the only score of the afternoon and defeated the Eastern 11. Back then, they didn't call them the New York Giants football team, this, that, it was called the New York 11, the Eastern 11. They basically, especially in a lot of articles, newspaper articles, they refer to like a basketball team, the New York 5. If it was a hockey team, the New York 6. If it was a baseball team, the New York 9, or I mean, so it says here, had Murtaugh sent the ball into the hands of his waiting teammate instead of shooting it into a vacant atmosphere, the two teams might have continued milling around the center of the field as they had done throughout the first half. New York needed but a yard to make a first down where Murtaugh committed his error. Their drive stopped. See, this, I don't know. This makes no sense to me at all. As here it says, oh, yeah. When Murtaugh committed his error, their drive stopped. They kicked, and Driscoll received in midfield. I see, in the book and all, it says he had a bad snap, and the Bears got the ball. Here in this article, it's saying he made a bad snap. I guess, it stopped the Giants' drive. They punted, and Driscoll received the punt at midfield. And they started around their own 47-yard line. So, right, it's very simple. You get this a lot. Especially a lot of times you'll get it conflicting, let's see, how much did it say it was here? Okay, here we go. Let me move this over here. Where are we at here? Is it 75? Oh, doesn't even say. But a lot of times you get conflicting attendance. Like one paper might say 10,000 showed up, and another might say 8,000. Very, very conflicting. But this happens a lot. The book, it says it was a bad snap. The Bears recovered at the 47-yard line. 7 plays later, they scored. Here it says the Giants had a bad snap. The drive stopped. They kicked. They punted. Driscoll received the ball at midfield, and then the Bears went on a drive to score a touchdown. So you get this a lot. Very, very conflicting. It says Patty Driscoll carries it over. On the second play, Patty drove through left tackle for 11 yards, which it said in the other article, and a first down at the Giants' 41-yard line. Before the cheers had subsided, Patty tucked the ball under his arm, ran back and wide, then cut loose with a pretty pass to Sen, the Bear half, who had scampered unobserved some 25 yards down the field. Bad zone coverage by the Giants, huh? Sen rolled and crawled an additional 5 yards, putting the ball on New York's 11-yard line. Then Romney twisted loose outside Alexander, the Giants' right tackle, and it was first down less than 2 feet from the goal line. Twice New York stopped Bear plunges, and it seemed that they might block the seeming inevitable. But Driscoll produced a punch, and the ball was over. So that was in the third quarter. Right. In the final quarter, New York outplayed the Bears, making 5 first downs and completing a like number of passes, but their efforts were futile. New York completed 8 passes during the afternoon, all on the short variety. But they could not have been traded for the one Driscoll to send heave. Let's see here. What opportunity Giants had to register came early in the first period when 3 consecutive downs brought the ball to the Bears' 20-yard stripe. But McBride's attempt at place kick from the 32-yard line was wide. So the Giants tried a field goal, and McBride kicked it wide. Romney intercepted 2 misdirected passes, which gave the Bears scoring opportunities, but Patty's toe was not equal to the occasion. Oh, here we go. Here, it has it right here. Okay. And his kicks were not sufficiently close to excite the 9,000 spectators who saw the game in spite of the threatening weather. So apparently missed that, some type of threatening weather going on. But so the Giants had a field goal attempt by McBride. It was wide. And then Romney, Patty Driscoll, apparently it looked like he had 2 field goal attempts. But neither one was sufficient, as they say here. They weren't good. They weren't sufficient, as they say in this article here. They were not sufficiently close to excite the 9,000 spectators who saw the game in spite of the threatening weather. McBride, former Syracuse star, was the visitors' attack, handling the ball on nearly every play. He plunged and ran, and on several occasions seemed on the verge of wrecking the contest with a spectacular run, but his journeys were always stopped by alert Bear tacklers. So, Giants had some chances, but substitutes, it said Lyman was in for Healy. These are for the Bears. Looks like Evan was in for Murray. Murray was in for Hallis. Sen was in for Walquist. And Sterneman was in for Haney. Then Hallis went back in for Mullen. Let's see. Can't read the name. Somebody went in for Joe Alexander. Joe Alexander went in for Murtaugh. Hogan went in for Hinkie Haynes. So the Giants had like 4 guys they substitute for. So, I mean, every game there's always anywhere from like 3 or 4 up to 6 or 7 substitutions. So the Giants had a few substitutions, but it was not enough. It was not meant to be. I mean, back then, a score is huge, and sometimes, as we've seen in this one game, a field goal, a touchdown, an extra point, sometimes that's all you need. It's not the way it is nowadays, right? Or, I mean, back then, especially, like, if you score a touchdown, you kick the extra point, and the other team scores, but they get the field goal extra point block or whatever, and it's 7-6. Sometimes that's good enough, So that's the way it was. I mean, the Giants had their chances, but they came up just a little bit short. I mean, this basically it looked like it was on a bad snap. That got snapped back, as I said. I mean, as I said in this one article, they said, the bad snap. It said stop the drive. The Giants kicked. Patty Driscoll received the punt. It sounded like the punt around midfield, and that's where the Bears started their drive. But here, Murtaugh moved over from right guard, shifted the ball between deep backs McBride and Haggerty, and the Bears recovered on their own 47-yard line. So, I mean, here on this book and on the other article that I read from the New York Times, it sounded like it was a bad snap that he tried to snap it. I don't know who he's trying to snap it to, but he snapped it. The Bears rushed back or whatever and wound up covering the ball on apparently, I guess, their own 47-yard line. And 7 plays later, Patty Driscoll went over from like the 1 foot line. He kicked the extra point, and the Bears wound up winning 7-0. So the Giants fell to 2-1. They would wind up losing in the next 2 games. So they would go 2-3, but they would go on a nice little tear. So they would go from 2-3, and they would wind up 8-4-1. So it is what it is. But the Giants fell a little bit short to the Chicago Bears. So that's what happened on this date, October 10th, 1926, in New York football Giants history. See you next time.